Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if your personality test actually tells the truth or how scientists get it right when building those tests? Today we're diving into a really neat study about how scientists can build better psychological tests. Think about all the personality questionnaires, the skill assessments, the surveys you take. How are those made? It is not just about throwing a bunch of questions together. Scientists need to figure out what questions actually measure what they're supposed to, and how many different things might be going on beneath the surface, or how many underlying traits are being measured. This paper talks about a new way to do that using something called bee swarm optimization, or BSASO for short. It sounds a bit sci-fi, but it is actually inspired by how bees work together to find the best food sources. The main idea here is that when scientists design a test, they often have a good idea of what they want to measure, say how anxious someone is or how good they are at problem solving, but sometimes the questions might be a bit fuzzy, or maybe a question accidentally measures something else too. This new method, BSO, helps untangle all of that. Instead of just looking at a pile of questions and trying to guess which ones fit best, BSO is like a super smart assistant for test developers. It looks at all the possible ways to group questions and figure out how many different underlying traits or factors are being measured. And it doesn't just do this once. It tries to find the best combination of questions and the best number of underlying traits that fit the data well, all at the same time. The scientists who wrote this paper took an existing bee-inspired method and made it even better specifically for situations where the things we're trying to measure are related to each other. For example, intelligence and creativity might be related, but they're still different things. These related things are called correlated factors. And when you have correlated factors, it can be tricky to figure out exactly which questions measure which factor without some questions accidentally measuring a bit of both. These are called cross-loadings, and they can really mess with the results. So, the scientists tweaked the BSO algorithm. Imagine the bees. You have some bees that go out and scout for potential new nests or ideas for a model. These are like the nest site scout bees. Then you have regular scout bees that go look for good food sources, which are like good sets of questions for a factor. And then you have onlooker bees that follow the scout bees to those food sources to get the most out of them. These different types of bees help the algorithm explore lots of possibilities. The nest site scouts help get things started with some sensible initial guesses, which is really important when you have a huge number of questions and potential factors. The regular scouts make bigger changes like adding or removing a factor, while the onlooker bees make smaller adjustments, like moving a question from one factor to another or deciding to drop a question altogether. So how did they test if this new BSO method actually works better than older ways of doing things? They ran a big simulation. Simulation is basically when scientists create a bunch of fake data based on a known structure, and then they see how well their method can recover that original structure. They created data sets that mimic different levels of complexity. Some had clear-cut factors with no messy overlap. Some had factors that were highly related, and others had noise items questions that are supposed to measure something real, but are pretty much useless or even misleading. They then compared BSO's performance to 4 traditional methods that scientists often use. These traditional methods usually involve a 2-step process. First, an exploratory factor analysis, EFA, to get a general idea of the structure, and then a confirmatory factor analysis, CFA, to test it. These CFA pipelines often rely on things like parallel analysis to figure out the number of factors and cutoff criteria to decide which items to keep or throw away. The big question was, can BSO find the truly best model, meaning the right number of factors and the best set of questions that measure those factors well, especially when things get complicated? And the results, they were pretty impressive. Across a bunch of different scenarios, BSO was really good at figuring out the right number of factors and picking out the best questions. For example, when they looked at how well the models fit, BSO consistently did a great job. It managed to satisfy most of the important criteria, like making sure the factors weren't too intertwined, which we talked about with those cross-loadings. Crucially, BSO was also good at getting the number of factors right, especially when the factors were supposed to be distinct. BSO was much better at not getting them mixed up. And what about those tricky noise items or items with those problematic cross-loadings? BSO was also very effective at weeding them out, leading to cleaner, more interpretable results. The scientists also checked if the BSU method gave similar results each time they ran it on the same data, using different starting points. They found it was very consistent, meaning it is reliable. Now for the big showdown, BSEO versus the traditional EFA, CFA pipelines. In most cases, BSEO blew them out of the water. In fact, the paper states that in 97.2% of the datasets and conditions they tested, BSEO performed better than the standard EFA-CFA methods. That is a huge win for this new approach. It means BSEO is consistently finding better models that are more accurate and easier to interpret. They also did a second simulation to figure out the best settings for BSO itself, like how many bees to use in the swarm. They found that the number of bees was the most important setting. More bees generally led to better results, especially when the data was really messy with lots of ambiguous questions. It was like having a bigger team of bees searching more thoroughly. So, what does this all mean? This study shows that BSO is a really powerful tool for scientists building psychological measures. It helps them create tests that are more accurate, more reliable, and better at identifying the true underlying patterns in the data. Think about it. A better design test means we get more accurate information about people's personalities, their skills, or whatever it is being measured. This can lead to better diagnosis, more effective treatments, and more accurate research findings. The key advantage of BSEO seems to be its integrated approach. Instead of doing things in separate steps where decisions in one step can mess up the next, BSEO looks at everything: the number of factors, the item selection, the factor relationships all at once. This avoids some of the common pitfalls of older methods, where removing one question might unintentionally change how all the other questions are interpreted. Of course, no study is perfect. The researchers mentioned that while BSO is great at finding the best model for a specific set of data, there is always a small chance of overfitting, especially if you are using it in a very exploratory way or with small amounts of data. They suggest that future research might look at things like cross-validation, which is like testing the model on completely new data to make sure it holds up. They also suggest that BSO could be made even better. For example, instead of just starting with random guesses, scientists might be able to tell BSO about their existing theories, giving it a more informed starting point. And they're thinking about how to handle situations where there are multiple models that look almost equally good. How do you choose between them? Overall, this BSO method is a significant step forward in test development. It is a more robust, data-driven way to build the tools that psychologists and other researchers use to understand human behavior. It's like upgrading from a blurry photograph to a high-definition image. You can see so much more clearly what is really there. If you found this breakdown helpful, please hit that like button, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more science demystified. We'll see you in the next video.